I'm getting so tired. I'm getting so.
Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. Life in the streets is unpredictable. You never know when something is going to pop off. You just never know about that type of lifestyle, right? But for the most part, it's the people that are not a part of that lifestyle are affected. You know, that's who gets affected mostly by the things that people in the streets do. The reckless behavior, you know? And that's kind of like what it is in the penitentiary. You got the majority of the people in the penitentiary don't belong to a gang. They don't belong to a gang, and they don't want to. But they are affected by how the gangs operate in prison, you know? And you always got somebody that wants to do something reckless, and it causes everybody else, especially the peons, to have to respond in a way that keeps them safe. You know what I'm saying? Now, this is a story about this dude named Ro. And Ro was in the penitentiary serving a 17-year sentence for drug possession and all kinds of other stuff, right? But let me give you a little background on Ro, okay? Ro was this dude on the streets. He was getting his money and all this and that, but he was reckless, undisciplined. You understand what I'm saying? If there is such a thing as a disciplined criminal, right? But he was mostly undisciplined. Always wanted to do something silly to get attention. He liked to be the center of attention. He wanted to be known as the one that would pop it off. And it's funny how people like that are always the ones that want to be known for popping off, but they ain't never really put in no work. Don't really want to put in no work. They just want you to believe that they'll put in work. You know what I'm saying? So check this out. One day, you know what I'm saying, during the holiday season, you know, Thanksgiving and Christmas and all this and that, Ro and his friends, they were driving around, you know what I'm saying, heading down to the mall and stuff like that because they had been hustling all day, getting their money. So now they wanted to go out, spend some money, go out to eat and do all these different types of things, right? And, you know, you at that particular time, you know, you got families out trying to do the same thing and enjoy life in a safe way. They don't want no smoke. They ain't looking for none of that kind of nonsense. They just want to be able to go out, shop, and do all the things that you do during the holiday season in peace. In peace. And then make it back home in one piece. But when Ro and his friends were on their way to the mall, they saw another group of guys now that they had been into it with. And Ro and his friends, they were always known for carrying guns and all of this and that, but none of them really wanted any smoke. They never really wanted any smoke. They just wanted to be known for that, so people would leave them alone. So Ro, in his haste, he leans out the car, and they see him, and he fires a couple of shots at them, but it's high over their heads. You know what I'm saying? Right there in the mall parking lot. People scatter, running for their lives. And both of these cars, they speed off. And back in that day, you know, the CCTV cameras, they were grainy. You really couldn't tell what was going on, right? So they end up getting away, and they go on with their lives. They go to some restaurant and eat and enjoy laughing and kicking and talking as if nothing had happened. Now these people, these innocent people out shopping, their lives have been changed forever because they're all traumatized. You know, they had kids out there, you know what I'm saying, trying to have fun and get them into the holiday spirit. And now they have to go home and explain to these kids what happened, what went wrong, and why come people are doing things like that. It scared them. So later on that night, Ro, he's at home, still living with his mama. He walks in and sees his mama sitting on the couch and sees that she's watching the news, and breaking news. She had been watching it for a few minutes, and they're talking about somebody that was in a shootout at the mall. They assumed it was local gang members or whatever the case may be, but they were talking about how it had affected all of the people, you know what I'm saying, in the parking lots and all of these different types of things. So Ro not wanting to hear it. He don't want to hear that because he knows it's him. He goes into the bedroom, turns on his music and lays down in the bed and goes to sleep as if nothing had happened. No concern at all for what happened to those people, not interested at all in taking and being held accountable and responsible for what he did. He just wants to go to sleep. And his friends, I imagine, did the same thing. They went on with their lives as if nothing had happened. Everything's cool. Everything's fine. And that's what happens You know what I'm saying? In the criminal world, you pretend that nothing wrong is happening and you go on with your life, oblivious to the pain that you're causing everybody else. Oblivious to the pain that you're causing everybody else. Okay? So he never really heard what was being said on the TV. So let's fast forward a little bit, right? Let's fast forward a little bit. A couple of years later, Roe finds himself in some situations in the streets, and he gets caught with a lot of drugs. And he stays out of jail on bond or up until he stayed out about 3 years. So it's a total of 5 years that he's, you know what I'm saying, just chilling after this particular incident. And he finally ends up being sent to the penitentiary with 17 years, you know what I'm saying, because he got caught with these drugs and all these other things, right? And lucky that the feds didn't pick it up because they were worried that the feds were going to pick up the case and all this and that. So he's in the state facility doing 17 calendar years for the crimes that he had committed. And when you're in prison, you know, they try to do everything that they can to try to uplift you and get you to think and see the world a different way, right? And they bring a lot of people in to talk to us. You know, celebrities, athletes, coaches, just people in the community, crime victims, all of these different types of people to try to get us to see how what we do, the life that we live, impacts everybody else. They want us to understand that in the hopes that it will discourage us from committing the types of crimes that we commit. So while, you know, Roe's sitting out in the audience, he's thinking about, you know, what the lady is talking about. He sees her sitting on the stage and she's in a wheelchair. And she rolls out, you know, to the microphone and she's talking, she's sharing her story. And she tells everybody on this particular night, during the holiday season, she was out with her husband, her 2 kids, and they were out shopping, wanting to enjoy the holiday season. And all of a sudden, shots rang out in the parking lot. And she's hit. And she says immediately when she fell to the ground, she knew that she couldn't feel her legs. And when her husband rolled her over on her back, because she fell face down, she's telling him, baby, I can't feel my legs. I can't feel my legs. And he's telling her to hold on. Somebody had called for the ambulance. And her 2 kids are crying, hugging their mama, and she's laying there on the pavement, tears rolling down her face. Her husband's trying to comfort her and keep her safe. Blood is coming out of her back. You know, her kids are laying there seeing this, and it's a terrible, terrible scene for anybody to have to endure, especially her kids, and she's trying to comfort them as she passes out. She fades out. And now her husband is panicking because she's unconscious and the kids are crying. And a couple of other women that were there on the scene, they come over to try to aid him, and they take the kids and they hold them and try to comfort them and tell them that they're going to be okay and their mom's going to be okay, but nobody knows. And the ambulance gets there. They put her in the ambulance and they speed her off to the hospital. And they get her off to the hospital, and the news people are talking. Breaking news. Shooting out at the mall. All of the things that are going on, right? And Roe's sitting in the audience and he's listening to this story, and it sounds familiar to him, but he can't quite put his finger on it. And she sat there and she continued to tell the story. And she said they never found the individuals that did it. They both, she said, it would look like it was 2 gangs, she said, shooting at each other from their cars. And they both sped off, and they were never able to find out who it was, and nobody ever said anything to the police about it. No witnesses came forward. Nobody. Nothing at all. And as Roe sat there and listened, he started to think, what if? What if this was the night that I was out and I was shooting? You know, and as she continued to talk, it became more and more certain to him that it was him. Because somebody in the audience asked her, what mall was this? What time of day was this? And the details just locked it in that it had to be him. And the audience, people in the audience, the inmates, some people were crying. Some people had their heads down, shaking their heads, making comments that that's messed up and all this and that, and they need to do something about that. These are the inmates. that are sitting in the audience saying these things. You know, gang members, they're sitting there shaking their heads, right? And Rose looking, and he's observing the scene, and all of a sudden he starts to cry. He uncontrollably, he couldn't help it. The story was too overwhelming for him, and he accepted the fact that it had to be him. And his first inclination was, do they know? Are they here to arrest me? Is she saying this and the police are going to come out and arrest me? And he starts to look around. His suspicions get the best of him, and he gets up and he walks out. And when he gets to the door, he tells the officer he wants to leave. He can't take it no more, with tears in his eyes. And the officer tells him to go back to the unit. At that point, he knows that he's not in threat of being arrested, but the fear is still overwhelming and it's on him. And he gets back to the unit, and he's sitting in his cell, and he cannot stop crying, thinking about this woman in this chair. And he's remembering some of the story that she was talking about, and talking about how her kids are a little older now, and how it impacted them, and excuse me, and how it impacted them, and how they were traumatized by the incident. And he can't seem to get it out of his head that he's to blame. He's to blame for all of this. So he goes out of his cell, and he goes to one of his partners, and he gets him something to drink. You know, they got that liquor and stuff in here at certain places, you know. So he goes to get something to drink to try to forget about what he had just heard, and it didn't work. So he gets him something to smoke, and he smokes that to try to forget, and it doesn't work. It doesn't seem to be anything that he can do to make this go away, this pain that he was feeling go away. And he called his mama. And when he called his mama, he told his mama that he needed to see her that weekend. And she's like, baby, what's wrong? He said, I need to talk to you. I need to tell you something. And she could tell that he's messed up and something's wrong. Excuse me. But she continues to push him, and he doesn't want to tell her. So that weekend, she makes her way up to the visitation, and she goes to see him. And as soon as he gets in there, she can see that he's still traumatized by whatever was bothering him. And before he could even get the words out of his mouth, he starts to cry, and he says, Mama, I shot that woman. And she looks at him, she said, what are you talking about, baby? And he tells her, he said, do you remember a few years ago when there was a shooting at the mall? And he's whispering to her. He don't want to say it loud because he's afraid that somebody might hear him. And if you've ever been into a prison visitation gallery, you know it's not that much privacy. So you got to be careful of what you say, because people are always listening, you know? And he told her, he reminded her about the mall, and that night he came home, and all of these different things. And he told her exactly what happened. He said, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it. I was just shooting in the area of the car, and one of the bullets must have hit her. He said, I saw her she came up here to speak to us, and she's in a wheelchair. And his mom said, oh my God, did she recognize you? He's like, no, Mama, she don't know who I am. They don't even know who did it. But I know who did it. So his mom, she's sitting there, and she said, I knew one day all of that reckless behavior that you were doing was going to catch up with you. She said, everybody pays one way or another. You don't have to get caught by the police to pay for what you did. You're going to have to live with that. And she said, so what are you going to do? She's trying to prod him into, being honest about the situation. And he tells her, Mom, I don't know what to do. He said, if I go tell the police, they're going to arrest me, and I'm going to get charged with it. And I'm going to be in here longer. And she says that she don't want to influence and put her finger on the scale. But she says that because she wants him to come to this conclusion on his own. It's time for him to become a man. So she wants him to come to this conclusion on his own. And he sits there and he continues to say that he don't want to go to the police. He can't tell them about this. And she says, but how do you think she'll feel not ever knowing who did this to her? How do you think she sleeps at night wondering if somebody's going to come back and hurt her or her kids? Wondering if this was something random or was it targeted? She don't know. She needs peace, son. It's what his mother kept telling him. She needs peace. And he tells her, Mama, I don't want to be in jail no longer than I have to. But she says, you're paying for it anyway. You're paying for it anyway. She said, it don't look like you've had any sleep. And he said, I ain't had no sleep, Mom. So she said, look, you got some decisions to make. So she kisses him and they continue to talk. And then she leaves the visitation and goes home, distraught about what her son had just told her. She's not knowing what to do. She wants to say something to somebody, but she, like him, is afraid that it's going to cost him more time in prison. More time in prison. She don't want that, but she wants him to be responsible. She needs him to do this. Excuse me. But she has this feeling that he's not. So over the next couple of months, he starts to drink more, smoke more, doing all of these different things. And his behavior becomes more erratic and he's not able to sleep, and he's becoming more and more dysfunctional on the compound, always wanting to fight and argue and not doing the things he's supposed to be doing. He's acting out, y'all. He's acting out. So one day, his counselor calls him in, talking to him, trying to understand what's going on with him. And she tells him that, he needs to do some soul searching to figure out what he's wanting to do with the rest of his life, because he can't continue to live life the way he's been living it. So he asked her all out of the blue. He said, that woman that came out here to speak a little bit ago in the wheelchair, what organization is that? And she told him, the woman had started an organization going from prison to prison, speaking to people in prison, trying to get them to understand how the things that they do can affect the lives of people that have nothing to do with the streets. So she gave him the address, and he wrote her a letter. And he told her that he was touched. He was touched by what she had said, and he was sorry that that had happened to her. Now, she had received letters like this all the time, so this was not an uncommon thing for her. So she took the letter away, and she wrote him back, and she told him thank you, and put him some pamphlets in there that she wanted him to spread around the prison, to the other inmates, making them aware of how their behavior is, just that type of thing, right? Something that she always did. It was standard for her to do that. This was not something unusual to write back, to an inmate that inquired about her and wanted to know more about her. And he wrote her back again, and he told her that pretty much the same thing, how sorry he was about what happened to her. And when she read that second letter and that third letter, it was something that kept nagging at her. This kept nagging her because she had never had somebody to do that. Continue to write her and basically saying the same thing in a different way over and over. So that night, when she went home, she talked to her husband about this. And she told him that she had this feeling that something was about this guy here. It was something different about him in these letters that he was writing. He kept saying he was sorry for what happened to her. But it was something about it. And her husband asked her, what is it that you think is going on? She said boldly, I think he's the one that might have done it. Or if not, he knows who did it. And he said, well, what do you want to do with it? And she said, I forgave him years ago. I forgave him. But I want to know if he's forgiven himself and taken accountability for what he's done. That's what I want to know. So she decided to write him back. And she wrote him back, but this time, when she wrote him back, she didn't write him back sending him pamphlets, telling him that she wished the best for him. She wrote him back as if he were the person that did it, and as if she knew that he was the one that did it. And when he received her letter and he opened it up and he proceeded to read it, cold chills washed all over his body and he started to sweat. And if you want to know what happens after that, you're going to have to tune in to the next episode. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.